Hi, I'm Carolyn Weatherly, dressed as Mary Austin Holley today at the Freeport Museum in Freeport, Texas. And we're here to talk about the Herstory of Texas. We have lots of information, and it's so wonderful, our Texas history about our famous men like Stephen F. Austin and Sam Houston and Mirabeau Bay Lamar, so many famous men, the men at the Alamo. But today we want to concentrate on some of the women who may have not got as much press, but they're just as important to our history. Our first one is Jane Long. She was orphaned at the age of 14 and widowed at 24. Jane Wilkinson Long led a long, hard life, but her independence and determination of her character earned her the title of the Mother of Texas. Here's Jane Long, 1798 to 1880. Jane, I love your curls. They are so in style right now. Let's go and learn a little bit more about her. In 1820, Jane Long joined her husband at Bolivar Point, where they established an outpost in an effort to help free the Texas from the Spanish rule. When her husband, James Long, left Bolivar Point on an excursion in September in 1821, Jane was expecting another child. She stayed behind and vowed to remain at the fort until his return. The plan failed, however, when James was captured and later accidentally killed in Mexico City. Many of our leaders were taken as prisoners. For instance, Stephen F. Austin was also taken as a prisoner in Mexico City, and he was there for over a year. Unaware of her husband's fate, Jane steadfastly remained at Bolivar Point through the winter of 1821 to 1822. The few other inhabitants left the fort as supplies ran out. Along with a 12-year-old servant and her own 6-year-old daughter, Jane stubbornly survived on dwindling supplies of cornmeal, salted fish, and oysters scavenged from the bay. As Jane later reported, the trio kept nearby Indians at a safe distance by the ruse of design to give the illusion that the fort was still protected by soldiers. On December 21st, in an ice-covered tent, Jane gave birth to Mary James Long. In 1832, Long opened a successful hotel in Brazoria. By 1835, when Stephen F. Austin returned from 18 months imprisonment in Mexico, that dinner was held in his honor. Throughout her long and active life in Texas, Jane became the object of many admirers and some would-be suitors. These no less included northern Texans like Bill Milam, William Travis, Stephen F. Austin himself, Sam Houston, and Mirabeau Lamar. She rejected all offers of matrimony, however, and died a widow. Jane Long is buried in Richmond, Texas, and on her gravestone it's inscribed, Mrs. Jane H. Long, the Mother of Texas. Here she is as our Mother of Texas, but I don't think that she felt like the Mother of Texas when she and her servant girl were in that fort defending it against Indians and scared and alone, not knowing if her husband was dead or alive. But she was a strong woman and gave birth to her daughter out there at Bolivar. Now, another one of the women we're going to talk about today is Elisabet Ney. Now, she was born in Münster, Westphalia, Germany in 1833. Her father was a stone carver, and as a young woman, Ney went on a huge hunger strike when she was told she would not be allowed to follow in his footsteps, because she was a female. You'll notice that a lot of our women today were not allowed or were ridiculed for performing what would be considered men's duties. She got her way and started sculpture in Munich and Berlin, where she developed a classical style that won her important patrons as a portrait scholar. After moving to Texas in 1872, she visited Austin at the invitation of Governor Orrin B. Roberts and decided to set up a studio there to resume her artistic career. Beginning in 1892, she sculpted numerous portrait busts, statues of Stephen F. Austin and Sam Houston for the Texas State Capitol, and a recumbent statue of Albert Sidney Johnston for the Texas State Cemetery. Copies of her Austin and Houston statues are also in the Statuary Hall in the United States Capitol. Her marble of Lady Macbeth is displayed at the Smithsonian National Museum of American Art. In addition to her art, Ney took the active role in civic affairs as shown in her correspondence with Marianne Folsom. She made her studio salon in which influential Texans could meet and discuss art and politics and ideas. She's one of our great, you may know, those of you in Brazoria County, of course, know there is a school named after her, as well as one named after Jane Long. Here we see her as she sculpted. What talent is that? I don't think I could do anything close to that. But she knew that that was something she could do. And just because women didn't normally do sculpting, that didn't stop her. Now we're going to go a few years in the future to Dr. Sophie Herzog. Now, Dr. Sophie was born in Austria in 1846. And in 1886, she moved to New York City where she studied medicine. Now, this is not a usual thing for women to do in that day. Women were not encouraged or accepted as physicians. She returned to Austria to complete her training, then opened a successful practice in Hoboken, New Jersey in 1895. Herzog decided to move to Brazoria, Texas, to be near her married daughter. Sophie Herzog was a shock to the small Texas town. A woman physician was unheard of, and Herzog wore her hair short, and she rode horseback astride instead of side saddle like a proper lady, and she shaded her face with a man's hat. However, her skill and dedication won over the town, and she became known as Dr. Sophie. She attracted so many bullets from gunfighters that she had a necklace made from 24 bullets that she wore constantly as a good luck charm. Here we see Dr. Sophie Herzog, and there you can see her necklace with the bullets in it. In addition to her medical practice, Dr. Sophie operated her own pharmacy, built and operated a hotel, and made herself wealthy by investing in real estate. I love these smart women. She was famous for her collection of medical specimens and animal skins, especially the rattlesnakes that she had skinned and dried and mounted herself. When St. Louis, Brownsville, and the Mexico Railway began laying track in South Texas, Dr. Sophie was often called to tend to injured and ill men and was known to be willing to render aid any time, day or night. The railroad officials hired her as a chief surgeon only to have their bosses back east demand that she resign. Dr. Sophie refused, saying they could fire her if she failed in her duties. Sophie continued her work for the railroad until shortly before her death at the age of 79. And there you see her. That must have been something that she wore when she was in Germany or even in New York where it was cooler. I doubt if she could have worn the fur hat very much around here in Texas. Now, our next woman is Carrie Nation. First, Carrie Nation moved to Texas in 1879. And Carrie and her husband brought a 1,700-acre plantation on the San Bernard River in hopes of making a living as planters. Neither of them knew anything about farming, and the crops failed quickly. David went on to Brazoria, the county seat, where he was admitted to the bar and practiced law. With his absence, a failing plantation, and not even a penny of money, Carrie and her family moved into the Columbia Hotel, where she became the innkeeper. To get things started, Carrie borrowed $3.50 from the cook's husband to buy sulfur for fumigating, rat poison, and soap. She used the newspapers and cloth over the holes in the walls and made the curtains out of old sheets. With the remaining dollar she had left, she bought 50 cents worth of meat and pennies worth of coffee, rice, sugar, potatoes, and flour. Because of the patronage from steamboat travelers on the Columbia Tap Railroad, the hotel became successful enough to support her family. During her stay in Texas, Carrie was in full support of the Women's Christian Temperance Union that worked to close 7 illegal liquor outlets through nonviolent means. Carrie felt it was her duty in line to warn young people about the effects of alcohol and tobacco and change the habits of users that became involved. She also took place in religious and civic activities and was a supporter of the women's suffrage and women's rights. Now, this was the thing that was not popular in this day and age. Women could not vote yet. And the idea of a woman going against her husband just because he wanted to drink was not very popular. In 1895, the family moved to Kansas, where Carrie began her career of busting up saloons in support of the Prohibition cause. She adopted the hatchet in 1900 as her tool of destruction, urging it to destroy liquor in places it sold. The sale of souvenir hatchets and earrings helped to pay her fines that resulted in over 30 arrests. That didn't stop her. She was known as the home defender and the barroom smasher with her dark clothes, hatchet, and her Bible in her hand. Nation had built an international reputation and found success with the lecture circuit. She sold photographs, hatchet pins, and home defender buttons to fund her effort. A year before Kansas women received the right to vote, Nation died June 9th in 1911 in Leavenworth, Kansas. Her own chosen epitaph read, "She hath done what she could." She managed to make a success for her family and take care of them, and then later in life made it her duty to support the Women's Christian Temperance Union. And there she is with her Bible.